Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined as always by Chris Bouguet. Hey, Chris.
Hey, Rachel. Hey, how's it going?
Good. What you got for me this week?
Well, if people have followed me on my social media stuff, they'll have seen that I am back from London and Paris, France. People know that if you've been listening to the podcast for the last couple episodes, that I was invited to go to a conference there, the Communication Matters Conference, which was awesome. Rachel, we missed you completely. So many people were like, give Rachel hugs and we love the podcast. And it was awesome. And there's going to be tons of content coming around that conference. There's certainly interviews that I've lined up. I talked to a bunch of people to come and be on the podcast and talk about different strategies and techniques and different things. You know, there was just so many connections that were made. Myself, there's certain sessions that I went to that I would love to share with you and brainstorm back and forth and just, unpack a little bit. And, just as we do, right? I just, you know how we come back from like ATIA or something like that and sort of unpack the conference, that sort of same thing. But that's not today, Rachel. Today I have something completely different to talk about. So I'm just teasing that that's coming. So here's what happened earlier this week. So I get back from London and Paris, and of course I've missed a week of work. So that Monday is, catching up on all the emails and stuff like that. One of my colleagues, Joyce, calls me up and says, Chris, I'm sick. And I have this thing lined up on Thursday, and I was going to ask one of the other team members, but I just know you love doing this, and I know you're probably scrambling because you're back, but I just know you would love to do this. Can you help me out? Because I'm afraid I might have to cancel this thing that I have to do on Thursday unless you could say you could be my backup and come. And so I was like, what is it, Joyce? She's like, well, and this thing we've done before. I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it was with a new speech therapist to me, like we had met before. The speech therapist was running a short session, maybe 30 to 45 minutes in a first grade classroom for all the kids, bringing communication devices and talking about what it means to be a good communication partner, how to find words, how to model. We talked to the teacher about, that kind of stuff. They're going to do that sort of experience. And she's like, so would you want to do that? And I was like, yes, because, people have heard me say this on the podcast, and you know this too, that, once upon a time, the knees on my khakis used to get worn out from playing on the floor with kids. And that happens less frequently now. As I've, in an administrative role, I'm in meetings talking about how our school district is wrestling with generative AI with other administrators, and how we're going to design systems and meeting with, I'm in meetings more than crawling on the floor with first graders, playing like I love. Right. So I was like, yes. And my entire team knows that, right? And knows that I miss it. So every time there's an opportunity where I get to flex a muscle or they see that for me, they're like, Chris, we're doing this thing. Can you come? Would you like to come? And I was like, yes, thank you. So this was one of those opportunities. And I was like, yes. And that was today. So I, this morning drove to the school and get to the school, walk in. Like I said, I hadn't really met the speech therapist. We just did some exchanges. And it turns out my colleague got better enough that she could come. But she was still like, I don't feel like, I'm not sick or contagious, but I don't feel like up to leading a lesson right now if I have someone else that can do it. And Chris, the speech therapist meant to do it. So I get in and I walk in, and the dean of this particular school comes up to me and she says, Chris, do you remember me? I was like, no, I don't. I know we've met and seen each other, and I know we've emailed. She's like, yeah, but do you remember me from back in the day? I'm like, help me. And she's like, you were my child speech therapist back when a number of years ago, right? And so she's like, I'm like, well, oh yeah, of course. Like, so tell me, she started describing her child, which I remembered, but I didn't remember the parent you have one or two interactions with in IEP meetings, and anyway, I just said, so how's she doing? Oh, she's married and she's got kids and she's loving it. And I'm like, yeah, but how's her speech? And she's like, no, she's great. I'm like, great, it worked, job done, right? Like, it was so fun. And it's so great because we've talked about this on the podcast too. So many times we don't find out what happens, the fruits of our labor. Do you know what I mean? Like we see little progress in the progress notes and we think things are getting better or the data shows that we're getting better. But that long-term outcome sometimes is lost on us. And, there's certainly, now with social media and that is a little bit, we see those a little bit more frequently, the fruits of our labor. But it was so great to hear from a parent that it was a good experience, that everything worked the way it was meant to work, and that the student was, communicating everything she wanted to say, how she wanted to say it. Wasn't an AAC user, but still, So then, that was a great little moment, and then came in and we were brainstorming with the speech therapist before going in, like, what's the lesson going to be like? Like, how do we want to do this? And unbeknownst to me, and actually unbeknownst to the speech therapist, word had spread that we were doing this around the school. And so the assistant principal showed up and an occupational therapist showed up and the dean that I was just talking about stayed. And suddenly we were having this sort of impromptu meeting, not really about what we were going to do in this first grade classroom, but a larger scale, like what can we do in the entire school? Like how can we build a culture around AAC and, what kind of parent interactions can we have to help parents learn from each other and have experiences that are positive. And it was just, what can we do to get more people in the school involved, and how can we spread this and trade information with other schools? And it just turned into this great brainstorming session, which is, again, a very, very awesome thing. And then the way that sort of ended up was the speech therapist said, well, okay, so I've only been working here a couple of years, and yes, I've been doing AAC. I'm getting better and better at it, but I would love it. I'm not sure I feel confident running this lesson with the first grade kids. I would be more confident if you led it, and then the next one we do, I lead it. And I was like, okay, so I got to lead this lesson where I'm on the ground, surrounded by first grade students with a first grade teacher who was so engaged, so into it. The principal came down and sat in the lesson, and everyone was engaging with him, and the teachers were engaging with him, and the students were engaging, and we just did like a little scavenger hunt, finding words, and we talked about which words do you think you use more frequently? Do you think you say the word pizza more frequently, or do you think you say the word eat more frequently? And when we talked about that, and of course the kids were all over the map, like pizza, and I was like, and then the first grade teacher was like, I don't think so, guys. And she's like, the way we did it was put your hands on your head if you think it's pizza, put your hands on your hips if you think it's eat. And it's like, all right, everybody turn around, and there's the principal, and there's the first grade teacher, and there's the assistants, all with their hands on their hips, showing them like it's eat that is more frequent. So long story short, it was just this great experience, getting to work with kids, laughing with kids, finding words. Okay, don't tell one little girl, right? She sorry, cracking up. This one little girl comes up to me. She turns the iPad to me, and she has spelled out, because we had talked about how not all the words are on here. There's only so many words on here. What would you do? And they're like, we have to learn spelling. I'm like, right. That's why your teacher's teaching how to spell in first grade, and that's why you're learning how to do it. Little girl turns the iPad to me, and she had typed in POOP. She just this cute little like coy smile, like, look what I did, right? And I was like, yeah, I was like, and then I had to, like, I smiled and laughed inside for a second. I was like, okay, I gotta say, it's like, yes, that's so funny, but also, would we say that with our friends? No, we probably wouldn't say that, right? So should we say it on here? And she's like, no. And then it's like, sure. So a teaching moment, but I'm just like, oh, that's such a shareable moment on the podcast. And it's so awesome, right? That's what kids want to do. They want to type in poop on the thing and play with it. You know what I mean? Not play with poop, but play with the language and the words and make people laugh and do fun stuff. And that's exactly what this experience was. It was just really great. It was great to get to flex that muscle. And then we left that. I talked to the first grade teacher for a little bit, and it was like, I guess towards the end of this thing, we pulled up, this was an app that you could have on the interactive whiteboard as well. And you could model on the interactive whiteboard. So I called up a student and said, I started to read a little book, and I was like, look, in this book, the word love is used over and over and over. Like chrysanthemum loved to sleep. She loved to eat. She loved to drink, whatever it was, right? But love was repeated over and over again. And I said, so I pulled up this little girl and I asked her to, when every time I say love, you find it on the board. And then, of course, she found it multiple times. And I turned to the teachers like, this could be every time you do reading. This could be every time you do a small group reading. It could be every time you do a whole group reading. Like, this is what could happen. Like, and I literally asked, I was like, because, we say this in our presentations, and I know other teachers have done it. It's like, do you have classroom jobs? She's like, of course I do, light switcher, line leader, that kind of stuff. Like, this could be the modeler of the day. She's like, done, I'm doing that. I was like, great. So really receptive, really excited, really had fun finding the words. And she's the teacher's like, can I take one of these home and like use it over the weekend? I was like, yeah, go ahead. She was like, and then bring it back, right? She's like, I'm gonna play with my husband, like, bring me wine. and so she was having this great experience. Like, yeah, that's what you need to do. Just go play with it. Have fun with it. Don't be scared with it. Ask some questions. Why did they put it here? Why is this thing yellow? Why do these cells have yellow backgrounds? I'm not going to tell you why they have yellow backgrounds. See if you can figure out what's in common with those. And then come back. The other people, when you come back, your speech therapist will know the answer. The assistive technology person, Joyce, who I mentioned, will know the answer if you get stuck. But, know that the people that put these things together knew what they were doing and that things were there for a reason, and just have fun with it. And she was all in. And then just to wrap this story up, then we went down to a preschool classroom that is an inclusive preschool classroom. So there's students with disabilities, but there's students who do not have disabilities that are integrated together into this inclusive preschool setting. And we did that same sort of experience with them. But just like the speech therapist said, okay, let me see you do it, and then I'll do it. She took the lead this time and I took the back seat, and she was like, at the end, we had all the kids one after the other giving commands to me, and then I would act out the commands. Like, we showed them where some of the verbs were. It's like, all right, tell Mr. B to sleep, and then I'd fall asleep, and tell Mr. B to go, and then I'd get up and run around the room. And it was just a blast. I could talk about it all day, and I'll think about it for months. I told them on the walk out, I was like, this didn't make my week. This made my month, because I don't get to I don't get to flex that muscle. I know I said that before, but I just so enjoy getting to do it. I'm sure you can hear the exuberance in my voice from getting to get to play and interact with kids and be with such awesome educators that were so invested. Like I said, the principal was there, I also got to see him on the way out, and I was like, so what'd you think? He's like, awesome. That was so awesome. I learned so much. He was goofing around with the other, putting in words and goofing around with the other staff. And I said, if you thought that was an awesome experience, then I want to invite you to do me a favor. I said, the next time you're at a principal's meeting and you go and sit down, you hobnob with your principal friends before the meeting starts or whatever, and they go, hey, what's going on at your school? Share this awesome thing, right? There'll be the temptation to kind of complain about something or share something that's happening with test scores or something like that. It's like, share this so that they get it continues to infect other people. And they go, well, we want that at our school. Yeah, we got kids that use those devices. Oh, they can be we got a second grader. What if they did that in our second grade? Like, it will spread if you start sharing some awesomeness, share those moments of awesome with everybody. So I know I'm rambling. Sorry, Rachel, I'm not even giving you a chance to respond to it, but I was just really excited and couldn't wait to share with it because I knew I was going to talk to you later in the day. And I was like, I can't wait to tell Rachel all about this.
Oh, I love it, Chris. You're so excited. I can just feel the enthusiasm and the passion, and I totally can resonate with that. And it's so funny. You're talking about this experience. Yesterday, I was on a call where one of my clients was having an AAC training for their team. And so I was invited to go, and it was completely the opposite of what you just explained. It was like kind of boring, kind of basic, not super like engaging. And as you were sharing your experience, I was thinking like, the beginning of the school year, this is when everyone's doing all the training, right? It's when everyone's going into the classrooms or having special meetings outside of, the school day to train communication partners on AAC for that new student in their class that uses AAC. Like, what if we did more activities like you just explained, where we're able to share about all the different components that are really important with AAC, but we do it in a way that not only teaches the classroom staff, but also teaches the children in the classroom so they can be allies for our students, they can be peer models, and it's just more engaging and more fun. It's like, and it doesn't have to be this like, oh, everyone stay after school for an hour to learn about AAC. It's like, we're learning about it right alongside of our students who are actually engaging with it. And it's super practical and it's super fun. And so it's just like, hopefully this story can really inspire people who are listening to rethink AAC training, because it doesn't have to be a super boring PowerPoint where you're just going over basic facts. And in fact, I would argue that that's not going to translate to our communication partners in the classroom actually knowing what to do. And so I love all the things that you're sharing, and I feel like it can be inspiration to our listeners to, again, rethink how we're supporting our students, especially in Gen Ed and mainstream classrooms. It's like, why wouldn't we involve the entire class if we could? Not only does it promote, AAC in that classroom, but it just creates a culture around it. And it's more fun. It's more engaging. Everyone wins, right?
Totally. It can be like eating candy instead of taking your medicine, right? It can taste sweet and be fun and something you want to do, as opposed to, got to take my medicine today. I got to stay after. I'm really motivated to do that. It doesn't have to suck, right?
Doesn't have to suck. Yeah, unfortunately, the training I went to wasn't so good. I won't say it sucked, but I will say that I was just kind of like, and I was looking around the room and everybody was just like eyes glazed over, like, I'm not even listening to this. And I was like, So I, of course, like piped in and I was like, let's talk about how that specific strategy is relevant to this student. And I'm trying to like breathe some life into like the practical application of these ideas, right? And I think that's so important, because oftentimes SLPs and AAC specialists, people listening to this podcast, they're responsible for teaching other people about AAC, and the way we teach something matters. Like how we present information matters. It's not just kind of having the bulleted checklist of things you need to target during a training. It's like you actually like can make it fun, engaging, relevant, practical, so that people have the tools and the inspiration to go out and do the thing, And so, yeah, I'm just like, it's so funny. We're just contrasting our experiences.
Well, you know who else is trying to build a culture around AAC in their school district and provide wider supports and think through these sort of systems that we can put in place so that it does create a culture? Kristen Hughes and Amy Kennedy, who I had the great opportunity to interview, and kind of they interviewed me. Again, it's more of a interactive conversation, or I guess just a conversation rather than an interview about a specific topic. But so without further ado, let me introduce you to Kristen Hughes and Amy Kennedy.
This October, join Impact Voices and the AAC community in Arlington, Virginia. Hello, I am Lance McLemore, a board member of Impact Voices. Don't miss our second Live AAC Hangout and celebration at the Crystal Gateway Marriott on October 17th and 18th. Our theme is Building Futures Together to empower AAC users, connect policymakers, employers, and each other. Hear from AAC users who are shaping the future, explore our challenges and opportunities, and discover how we can all work together for a more inclusive world. Register today at impactvoices.org. We can't wait to see you at Ivy Live 2024.
Welcome to Talking with Tech. My name is Chris Bouguet, and today I'm joined with 1.5 special guests. Is that the best way to put that, Amy? I don't know. Kristen, how about we start with you, and then we can pitch it over to Amy. And Amy, you can say why I'm calling you like half a participant today.
Okay.
Kristen?
Okay. You just want me to introduce myself?
Yeah, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and why we're here today.
So my name's Kristen Hughes. I'm a speech language pathologist that works for Baldwin County Public Schools, which is in South Alabama along the Gulf Coast. I've been a speech therapist for a little over 8 years. I've worked in the nursing home setting, early intervention, and now I'm in the schools. And my son is actually an AAC user. He is 6 years old. And I've primarily been like an itinerant SLP within our school district, but I'm going to be transitioning into a new role as an assistive technology or AAC SLP. So we're very excited about that.
Awesome. And Kristen, just real quick, will you be the only person in that role, or is like a whole team being developed, or it's like you're the team?
Well, a lot of it kind of has gone through this process. So initially we did have like a team of like kind of like the expert model. Like we had an SLP, a PT, a OT, and then this guy who kind of just does assistive technology in general and like vision stuff. And we were doing like all of the evaluations were all formal and they were taking forever. So then we had someone else move in like from Georgia who did AT over there. And she was like, well, the SLPs can just be doing their evaluations. And so it kind of got turned over to all of us, but then a lot of us weren't like super comfortable or didn't have a lot of training or felt like we needed more support, especially like for the more complex kiddos that we couldn't just slap on an app or that sort of thing. So yes, all of that to say, I am basically the person that's going to be supporting all of the SLPs. They're still going to be doing a lot of their own evaluations, I guess you could call it. But I'll be there to help coach, support them and the classroom teachers, and also handle like writing reports through insurance and obtaining equipment and that sort of thing.
Okay. Exciting. New role for you, you said, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. And then Amy, you want to tell us a little bit about why I said you're like half a participant today?
Yes. So I have a background in speech pathology and was a speech therapist in the county for 16 years before I moved into this role. So I am a resource consultant for the special services department. So just basically helping to train teachers, troubleshooting, helping with paperwork, just different things like that. But I cover a couple of schools in our county, as well as all of our special education preschool classrooms and all of our speech therapists.
Awesome. And just before we started recording, you said, I'm mostly going to listen in because I've got all these core boards I need to slice. So yes. I'll jump in if I need to, but I'm going to be doing double duty here, working through the summer, getting ready for the school year. Is that fair?
Right. That is correct. We are trying to, we've printed large poster size core boards for all of our preschool, multiple disabilities, and Project Reach, which is our significant communication and behavior students. We've printed those for all of those teachers to have in their classroom to display for them to use while they're teaching. So I have finished 60 of them and have about 20 left. So I'm trying to get those cut and laminated so we can get those out before the school year starts.
Sounds great. All right. So Kristen, tell us a little bit about how we got hooked up for today and what the discussion is going to be about.
Yeah, so you and I have been emailing back and forth mainly about the specific system for first approach or whatever it's called. Mm-hmm. It's got such a long name. But basically us kind of choosing an app, not to be for every single kid, but just to kind of be like our primary app so that we can get our teachers more comfortable with implementing AAC and that sort of thing. So that is why Amy has printed all those boards and we're getting started with that. But I was kind of getting lost in the weeds, I guess, as far as like creating a super clear like AAC process for everyone, like how to go through formal evaluation, I guess, like the process for that, and when to do it, when not to do it. and I guess the paperwork and that sort of thing. So a big concern that I had, I recently went to like the state conference and they were talking about formal evaluations. And we don't have like a timeline in the state of Alabama for those. We call it like we do like a re-eval for IEP changes. But they said at the conference, they were like, well, you really shouldn't be taking like more than 90 days to do it, which I've heard that number like in other states. But like the thought that was going through my head was like, I've had kids before where I've been trialing things and getting stuff like equipment from companies and stuff, and it takes me longer sometimes than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, I don't know. What do you guys do?
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so a couple things. Just in what you said there, let me ask some clarifying questions. They said at the state conference, you shouldn't be taking more than 90 days. So 89 is okay, right? Or if 91, that's not really okay. Like, what's the why 90 is a question.
I have no idea.
Right? Okay,
Yeah.
So that's just sort of because it feels arbitrary to me, like why not 60 or why not 180? Like, what's the rationale for 90? So I know that's not you, that's them and whoever them is, right? But that throwing numbers like that out has been sort of a thing in the world of assistive technology and AAC, well, really doing evaluations in general when it comes to students with disabilities, is like we sort of pick this target of a date when really, why? Is there some sort of evidence that suggests that if we did it in 60 days or we did it in 90 days, we'd get a better outcome? And if we did it in 75 days, like I'm not sure why that number exists. So that's number one. And I think I see you nodding along like, yeah, it is kind of arbitrary. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, that's number one. And then you use the term formal evaluation. And so let me ask you this. What's an informal evaluation?
I guess. Well,
there isn't one. There isn't one.
Not. I feel like you're kind of doing dynamic assessment as you're trialing anyways. You're giving the kids something and basically doing your therapy and seeing how they respond to it.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start at the very beginning here. We have a teacher, and that teacher has a student in that classroom. The speech therapist is a person that's supporting that classroom. So far, am I painting the picture?
Yes.
Okay. And then somebody says, hey, we think this kid might need AAC, or they might, we're thinking AAC for this kid. What do you feel like the teachers and the speech therapist's next step is?
Typically we get like an app and start trialing it.
So how do you pick which app do you start trialing?
That has been a question we've all been talking about. And that's kind of why we were trying to move to the specific language system first approach.
Gotcha.
Now, the copies that we have in our district right now are LAMP, which I think looking at the list of what everybody has right now, LAMP is the primary one that's being used.
Okay.
Proloquo to go, because the guy who did AT before on that team, I think he was kind of just putting that out for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of his go-to choice. And then they got a few copies of Touch Chat because it had the head tracking on the app.
Okay. So if you made a list, if you made a giant spreadsheet of all the people, all the learners that have AAC, I'm hearing you say LAMP comes out as the most frequently used, and then the second runner up there is Proloquo, and then after that it's Touch Chat. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
How did LAMP get decided over the course of a few years? Has it been like, okay, well, we wanted to try something, so the speech therapist in that's supporting that team or that teacher and that student would go, okay, well, let's try LAMP, and it's sort of based on the preferences of that individual speech therapist? Is that I'm taking a stab? Is that
probably? I think that our area is just very heavy as far as LAMP goes. Like all of our outpatient clinics, the therapists that are there, they're getting LAMP for most of, not all those kids.
Mm-hmm.
I guess with United Ability and stuff being up there, and they do a lot of LAMP up there too. So I think, yes, it's just like familiarity and that sort of thing. And people really like the motor planning aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. So with the decision-making process for LAMP, Proloquo, Touch Chat, or really anything else, does it mostly reside in that speech therapist that says, here's what I think we should try?
Yes.
Okay. And then, Amy, this might be you, but a little bit of Kristen. Okay. So would you, what are some barriers your speech therapist that you work with would say they have around AAC? Like their punch in the gut frustration. Oh, there goes Amy. So
Uh-oh.
her battery died. I'm sure of it.
Well, I can try to answer your question.
Yeah.
I think it just varies. Like some of our speech therapists are like, I only have a bachelor's degree. I've never been trained in AAC. I don't even know what that is. It's very intimidating and scary.
Mm-hmm.
Some of our SLPs are very strong and have a lot of training. But the main thing that I hear is they just can't get the teachers to get them off the shelf. And they have very high caseloads, the SLPs do as well. And so they're like, I just don't have time. I don't have time to do this. And they won't do anything. And,
Yeah, 1,000%, Kristen. And it's so funny, the listeners can't see this, but I just made this face when you were talking because I knew that's what you're going to say, right? Like I absolutely knew you were going to say, we don't have time and we can't get it off the shelf, or there's abandonment issues. All right. Amy's computer died for a second. Amy,
got kicked out somehow.
What do you think because you didn't hear what we just said, right? What do you think are the greatest frustrations of the speech therapists around implementing AAC or AAC in general?
Probably the biggest one is not enough time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I think some of them feel like their caseloads are too large, which some of them were
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of last year. But we've hired some new staff and gotten some new positions so that we can hopefully alleviate some of that.
Okay. For the ones that are kind of comfortable with AAC and they're trying to implement it, where does their frustration lie?
I think the ones that kind of have some background knowledge, their main concern is time. The others, I think that a lot of them don't feel comfortable and maybe feel like they lack knowledge or expertise in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of becomes a barrier as well.
Okay. Would it be fair to say, now this isn't just for you, Amy, back to Kristen or the both of you. So if as speech therapist, whether they feel secure with their AAC knowledge or they don't, something you both said is time. And that would be probably number one. If we were playing Family Feud, number one answer, right? Number two might be how secure they feel. And number three would be what Kristen said, Amy, which was another thing that Kristen said, which is the teachers aren't implementing it. It's sitting on the shelf, right? And
Yes.
you're not in. Okay. So let's just start with that time issue. When you think of the pie chart of how they're spending their time, do you find that the way they're introducing and selecting AAC is going through, again, you mentioned this word trial, right? So I think I want it to be this. I'm going to trial it for a while. I'm going to collect data on how it's going or doing, and then I'm going to pick something. Is that a part of your current process?
Yes.
Yeah. And then once they've trialed it and they think they want something, do they have to document that or justify it in some way? Is that when you get to that, I'm going to put it in quotes here, that formal evaluation?
Well, and that was kind of a question I was going to ask you, because if they figured out the app that they want and they're good to go with it, at what point do you meet to put that in the IEP? Like, how do we create a good paper trail? Like, what if the kid moves in the middle of the trial? Because we have kids move in and out all the time, and then all of that is just lost.
Yeah.
I don't think we're moving like to a formal AT evaluation at that point. I think what they were wanting us to do, the new person who came in, was if that wasn't working and we had kids who were like more complex or needed something else or needed a different access method, at that point we would do formal.
Gotcha. And that's sort of tricky, right? Because what line do you cross to say, and then why not choose? How did we if we picked the wrong thing in the first place, could we have picked something better in the first place? So is there a better process so that we didn't waste 90 days trying something that doesn't work, right? So there's a different approach here. And that approach might be, again, tier 1 support sounds like Lamp Words for Life is your go-to sort of thing. With that in mind, do your teachers have iPads with Lamp Words for Life on them as modeling tools? Does your speech therapist have an iPad with Lamp Words for Life as a modeling tool? And follow up to that, Amy, you're cutting those core boards. Is the core board a screenshot of Lamp Words for the home screen of Lamp Words for Life?
Yes, our SLPs do have copies of LAMP on their iPads. Amy, I'm not sure. Do all of our teachers have iPads with?
No, not all of them.
Okay.
But all of our speech therapists do, but not all of our teachers. Some of them do. And some of them, especially like our preschool teachers, have requested it. So if they have a kid that they think would benefit from doing some trials, then we can give them an iPad that has it available.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be trialing. It wouldn't be for like universal support, I guess is what we're saying.
Right.
So,
at this point.
Kristen, I heard you say that could be a goal, and that just completely resonates with me, is that you probably have a spreadsheet of all the teachers and their classrooms, right? And I could totally see, or easy enough to create one, or that could be a goal to create one. And I already picture it with tabs down at the bottom for each year, right? But starting just this year, creating a spreadsheet that has all the teachers, and then do they have an iPad or don't they? That gives you a number of what do we need to get? Like when you're going to administration and saying, this is what we think we need this as a tier 1 support. Yes, we're going low tech. Amy's been working all summer cutting up core boards for us. But beyond that, our next step is to make the electronic piece the tier 1, not just the paper-based. And we're sort of all on our way there because some people already have it. We're just filling in the gaps of the people that don't. And here's the number we need this particular year. Does that sound like, and I'll just say, traditionally what I found not traditionally, over time, what I found is that it's not so much finding the money or the resources, it's understanding that you need them in the first place. Once you know, I need 60 iPads. Okay, let's go. How do we find it? How do we get it? Who are we partnering with? Are we doing Donors Choose, or are we doing PTO, or are we doing a car wash? Like, what are we doing? We're getting 60 iPads, right? And we're not going to buy the app until it goes on sale. So we're good there. We'll get it at 75% off. School districts can get it at 50% off if you're doing volume purchase. And then during those app sales, it usually goes on sale for another 50% off, which means that it's 75% off total. So that's the time to buy. I think you guys know that, but if we're doing a podcast, people might be listening going, what? And you have to buy them in groups of 10. So, okay, so let me just stop there. Does that sound like an action step for you, is creating a spreadsheet and figuring out the number to present as iPads, as teacher devices?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Going on my list.
Okay. And then Amy, don't kick me. Okay. How about part B to that question? The giant posters that you're printing out, are those Lamp Words for Life?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, all right. And see, I'm really excited about that because for years it has not been that. Is many places have sort of, because we understood core vocabulary. So when I say we, kind of as speech therapists, all kind of or in a 3-year period, everyone got the tidal wave of core vocabulary. So everyone ran out and sort of made core boards, but they were random core boards, and they didn't have a follow through to some sort of high tech device. So it sounds like you're already past that. That's not something you're dealing with as an issue. So just give yourself like a reaffirming pat on the back. Like, that's awesome. Like we do have some sort of through line from our paper to our high tech, even though we don't have to start with high tech. We're just building a culture around this, and the posters are just a piece of that. Is that all a fair way of summarizing what you're trying to do?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now we have now what happens, why that changes is the teacher goes, all right, so we've been using LAMP in our classroom and we don't have a particular iPad for this kid, but man, is he coming over and grabbing my device, or he's going up to that core board, or we've got the small laminated core boards or none of that's happening, but we still feel like they need something. What's the next step? And this is what I think you're really kind of struggling with, right? Is that like, well, should it be an evaluation? And does a speech therapist do it? And you said, how do we do it? So I'm going to tell you how we do it as maybe something that you could consider as an option. So if we go back to the problem of, man, I don't have time. And now I'm doing all this time to do an evaluation and write up the results and look at the data and collect the data. And oh, by the way, the teachers aren't really implementing it the way I want them to implement it. I mean, some are, but some aren't. And so that's a variable in how much the data I'm collecting, right? Because that teacher in classroom 141 collects data and does modeling all the time. But in 142, that person, they won't do it. How come they won't do it? And there's this, okay, well, is that influencing the data that I'm collecting? Is how much they're modeling, right? So, and how much they know how to implement it. So maybe there's a better way. And this is how we do it. The second someone says, we think a kid needs something, we pull together a team. So Kristen, you said you kind of used to have a team, but I'm thinking, and the way we do it is the school-based team. So you very likely, there's an occupational therapist supporting that classroom. Clearly there's a speech therapist, maybe a physical therapist. And I don't know that the OT and PT always need to be involved, but I'd like to invite them at any time. Of course, the classroom teacher, the parent, and any outside provider that the parents give you permission to correspond with. So a private speech therapist, and then anyone else that you think is important in the decision-making process. Imagine pulling them together for a hour meeting. That's random. Like it could be a little bit longer. It could be, but meetings generally is a good 60 minutes is a good time. We can always come back and meet again if we don't finish in that 60 minutes. And we can all be really happy if we get done before that 60 minutes and we can have more time on our calendar. So if you just have like a 60 minute meeting where you say, okay, now let's together collectively decide, what do we think this learner needs to support their language? And then the speech therapist takes on a different role, or maybe Amy or Kristen, you take on a different role as a facilitator or guide of asking the questions to help that team decide what the thing is they'd like to try to implement. And notice I very specifically do not use the word trial. I use the word try. And I'll explain that in a second. But okay, so pull them all together and you have this structured conversation going, all right, what do we think we need? Well, all right, team, do we know that we've been focusing on core vocabulary and core vocabulary? So clearly we need an app that has core vocabulary, right? We need some sort of tool that has core vocabulary. Everyone agree? So you write core vocabulary and imagine this in a grid, okay, or a table. So the first column in the table, you first cell one, column one, row one, you write core vocabulary. Just let me stop there and say, what other questions might you ask this team to help tease out what are the things this kid might need? What are some questions that jump to your mind?
Does the system have a keyboard?
Aha, right? Do we think this kid is going to learn to spell someday? Then let's get him a keyboard. Hey, guess what? That fringe vocabulary that you've been wondering, hey, can we add that to the device? Yes, you can, but how often do you use it? How about we jump over to the keyboard and start spelling those out on your modeling device? And just, Amy, I'm guessing your posters don't have a keyboard, right? Right? Which is more impetus when your administrator goes, well, wait, didn't we buy these posters? Like, why are we getting 60 iPads? Because the iPads have keyboards and our posters don't, right? As one design feature. So, okay. So keyboard. Yes. Awesome. Kristen, what else?
Motor planning.
Yes. Okay. Exactly. Let's so we do this, we've done this activity, and we wouldn't do this in these 60 minutes, but imagine pulling together Amy being like one of the lead speech therapists, a handful of speech therapists and whoever else, and doing this exercise. What I call is how many hits. So that exercise is simply this. All right, Amy, give me three-word phrases. Kristen, you give me give me 3 4-word phrases, and one of them has to be a question. Sarah, give me a 5-sentence question and make sure there's a fringe vocabulary word in each one, right? You make a list in the first column of a different spreadsheet, and you say, okay, we have a list of sentences. Now, on Lamp Words for Life, how many hits does it take to get to these sentences? In Prolo Quo, with about 80 cells, how many hits does it take? TD Snap or Touch Chat, how many hits does it take? And you can do a little exercise to see which one has the least number of hits, so that you know you're decreasing how many hits it takes to get to the center of the lollipop. You know what I mean? To get to say that phrase. And that would be all the apps. It's going to be a motor plan to get to the words. It's just which one has the simplest motor plan. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to do that every single time. Just if enough people sort of recognized that, hey, we did this experiment and this one comes out of the wash most frequently, it can give you some insight onto what's the most frequently used app. Does that help?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Besides motor planning, anything else sort of jump to your mind?
Oh gosh, I'm on the spot.
Well, no, I
know. I'm thinking about. I mean, I always go to like, can it be adapted in some way? Because I'm just thinking about my own child. He has CBI, so our high contrast icons available.
Bingo. And now you wouldn't necessarily need that. So does every student need it? No, but I would make the argument, you've heard it here first on this podcast, that eventually the default mode for apps will be black screen with white text. That's not how it is right now, but someday that's how it's going to be, right? So, but your point is, we're talking about in that 60 minutes where we're talking about this kid, let's say it's your kid, Kristen, and you go, well, I know my kid needs black backgrounds with white text, and can it have different color borders around some of the words or all of the words? And can we increase the spacing besides? All those are design considerations that you might put down in that first column. And then when you're looking at options, because that's what the next columns are, Lamp Words for Life, Prolo Quo, Touch Chat, now you can kind of match them up. Other questions you might ask, just to finish, how many hits does it take to get to the grammatical markers? Like, do we think this kid is eventually going to use ing and ed and s? Okay, we got to make sure they have the grant. And what is that like? Does it mean I have to change my motor plan and press hard, just because now I have to teach them to press and hold for a thing to come up with grammar? Or is it let's just discuss, how does the grammar look on these different apps? You already said keyboard. I would argue that the keyboard would be word prediction as well. So for teaching literacy, we can say, can this kid recognize? Let's teach the kid to recognize the words. They don't have to spell the entire word. You mentioned it, Kristen, again, about a particular kid. What's their access methodology, right? Are we thinking eye gaze? Are we thinking head tracking? Are we thinking direct select? Are we thinking direct select, but maybe a key guard because they hit? So a discussion about access. Right? You said, can it be customized in some way, or like you said, the black background? I would also add quick fire phrases. What does programming look like, right? And if you were for the people that are talking about Gestalt, like, hey, can we add phrases? Yeah, that's a quick fire phrase. You could add a longer phrase if you wanted to. I would also argue, what are the voice options? Like, are there a whole bunch of different inflections, and can that match what the student would like their voice to sound like, or what the parents would like the student's voice to sound like, right? And then the last one that I think is really, really important is, all right, the class that this student's in, what are they already using? What are they already familiar with? Because if they're already familiar with this, that's less of a learning curve than that we'll have to teach them. Now, that shouldn't be the deciding factor, but is it certainly in the mix of consideration? Yeah, Lamp Words for Life, they're good with that. Like, they're pretty comfortable with those but guess what? This kid speaks Vietnamese, and we want Vietnamese to be on here, and Lamp Words for Life doesn't translate to Vietnamese. So do we have another tool that speaks Vietnamese? Okay, so guess what? You're going to have to learn this other tool, because that thing came out of the wash a little bit bigger, or a little bit had more yeses, and just And if you have that discussion and you ask those sorts of questions and you're getting everybody's input at the end, right, as you fill this out, you go, well, okay, let's look at LAMP, and let's look at Proloquo, and let's look at Touch Chat, and let's look at anything else we need to look at, because guess what? None of these things really match. Or this thing came out of the wash the most. Do we all agree? People can't see me, but I'm looking around this mythical table and I'm going, do we all agree that this is what we think we should try? And like, yeah, it seems to that flow makes sense. Parents, do you want to try this at home? And teacher, you think you can implement this? And private speech therapist, look good to you, because it looks like this thought process led us to this decision. And then the trial is over because you've already thought through what the thing is you'd like to try, start implementing it. And I'll put this in quotes, the trial begins, because now you can start collecting data. Now we're all implementing with fidelity. At any point, if for some reason you think it's not working or someone has questions, you can come back to the table. And the first question I would ask is, what can we do to change the instruction? Why isn't it working? Not necessarily, oh, well, the app that we spent all this time trying to figure out what was the right one, we messed it up. We probably got the wrong app. No, you probably got it right. There's some implementation thing that wasn't right. The teacher got sick and they were out, or they quit. Or we did this in April and a new team came in. So there was a change. So some of the team members were on board, but not like there's some sort of dynamic that will trip people up in some cases. But the point is, it wasn't the outside speech therapist. I don't mean the private. I mean just a speech therapist that has, 68 kids on their caseload. Some of them have AAC. They came in, they said to do this. The other people in the room are like, I don't know, sure. Oh, here comes Amy. Get out that device. Now they can say, wait, we all have ownership on this choice. And we all have some responsibility around this choice. And I don't want to be wrong. So I want to implement it. And so now in 1 hour's time-ish, because you also said, Kristen, there are some times when it takes more time than that, right? Like, yeah, this kid might be a switch user, or we're not sure what the access methodology is. So we're going to narrow it down to these two things. And so we are going to have a little bit of like, all right, just for like a day, we want to try this, and the next day we want to try this, but that's very minimal. For the most part, and we just want to try it to see. We think the kid can hit this switch, but we're not sure. And we're not sure if we should place it by their knee or by their elbow. So we're going to try some things, but you've decided you're trying this together. You've decided you're trying a switch, or switches. All that stuff also becomes, you take that table that you're filling out, and at the end, you copy that table and you plop it into Microsoft Copilot or ChatGPT. Take out the kid's name, make sure there's no identifying information, and you say, write a little summary of what we decided here. And of course, you don't have to do that. You could write the summary yourself. But if your number one thing is time, right? Like, hey, do that. And then you have your justification. You have someone who holds the purse string says, well, we don't have we don't have that app, or we don't have an iPad with that. How did you? Well, this whole team got together. You can clearly see our thinking and why we think this kid needs this. And that's why we need it. And we are deciding as a team, as opposed to one person coming in, picking something they think they like that guy who liked Proloquo, or that person that liked LAMP. Like, this way we're deciding together what we think we want as our tool. And that becomes the justification. And you also have a document then that will move with the student, so that when the next team comes on board, because you're laughing, you must have a high turnover rate just like everywhere else in the country. Then you can go, well, what did we decide? Right here, follow through right here. Here's the whole thing. This is how we decided. As opposed to, what were they using? How did that, that speech therapist left and the new speech therapist came in and they really like touch chat over blah, blah, blah. So now they're making a change. Whoa. We got a whole thing here that we decided how we landed on things. So I did a lot of talking there. What do you think about something like that?
So you're doing it all up front. Like, we were just kind of trialing and then saying, oh, this is working, we'll add it to the IEP.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, Kristen, this is why I say I specifically use the word try rather than trial. Many years ago, I realized that trialing things was a bit problematic in that when you say the word trial, it's sort of like I want to do a test, right? So it sort of says, I'm not sure, right? I want to try this and get some data. I want to try this and get some data. And I want to try this and get some data. And that's sort of how insurance companies want it, right? But is working for a public school entity, you don't have to do it that way. And there's no evidence that I know of that says that way produces better results than what I just described to you. So, the things that's problematic with trialing is, how did you decide which thing to trial first? Like, do you pick the thing that you know won't work, or do you pick the thing that you think will work? And how did you decide what you think will work? Well, whatever that thought process is, could be the thing that you just used to implement it. Second thing is, what does a successful trial look like? There is no delineating number or factor or what magic line does someone have to cross to say this is a successful trial? And the time factor, this is why I was sort of joking around about 90 days. Well, we implemented this trial for 30 days. Okay. Did that include sick days? Did that include when the teacher was there or when the teacher wasn't there? Well, we're in middle school. We do an A/B schedule. So does that just on A days or B days or like what? So there's so many variables. The kid was sick for a few days. How much skill knowledge does the teacher have? So there's all these variables that sort of interrupt the scientific method that is sort of suggested when you say the word trial, which is why I've been moving away from the word trial for ages and say, we're going to pick something and then we're going to implement it. We're going to try it. I put that in quotes, but we believe this is it. We're very confident that this is it. Prove us wrong. The kid's going to have to prove us wrong because we're going to keep implementing it and trying it. And what if back in that trial mode, what if the kid we tried it for 45 days. That's what we decided our trial was, 45 days. And it was the 46th day that the kid would have got it, because we know language takes that much longer. You know what I mean? So
that's what I was going to say. Sometimes it just takes more time.
Yeah.
And that's why I was so confused, because I'm like, I mean, for instance, my own child, it probably took 3 years for him to understand that there was a second hit on LAMP. But somebody would have given up on him. People did give up on him very early on, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, and that's a tricky thing with LAMP in particular, the teachers specifically, but anyone who's first implementing LAMP, I say this all the time, people look at it and go, well, this doesn't make any sense. But then with a little bit of training, you start to realize, oh, there's patterns here. And yes, there's a second hit, but really it's one motor plan. Right. And there's a structure to it. There's a verb line, and that's where the hits are. So I don't have to explain it to you. I'm sure you're familiar now, but that is the reason. If you're using LAMP as your sort of tier one, well, now what happens is we get new teachers. We need to spend some time with those new teachers, kind of showing them the structure, and the new teaching assistants, the structure of LAMP is structured. Otherwise they won't know. Right. And it's that your kids, like your child, we can get them there faster if the teachers know. And the speech therapists are currently saying, how do I have time? When do I have time to train them? Now you have more time because you're doing less evaluations. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So I guess with the paperwork process of it, it sounds like you're just having an IEP meeting.
Kinda. Yeah. I don't. So that has been a point of like wrestling with. It's the players of the IEP team except, do you really feel like you need a general ed teacher there? And maybe sometimes you do. I don't know that you do. Do you really feel like you need an administrator there every single time? I don't know that you do. So this could be just sort of what's called a staffing meeting or an instructional meeting. And then, if you've already got an accommodation that says AAC, or you want to change the accommodation, you can always say, hey, we're not the IEP team. We think this might be an IEP team decision. Let's get those other players. Let's talk through why we think this might be an accommodation and get everybody's input, and then let the IEP team decide this is what the accommodation should be. But in the same way, let's say a speech therapist and let's take speech out of it. Let's just say a instructional technology person and a second grade teacher are having lunch together, and that second grade teacher is just like, oh, geez, this kid, he's not reading, and I'm trying this structured approach. Hey, have you tried like hitting this play button and having him like read with his ears? No, I've never tried text to speech. Well, it's not going to solve reading, but that's something to try. Did we just violate some sort of IEP thing because we're trying some sort of instructional thing? No, we're not, right? It's just an instructional tool that we're trying. Well, same thing here. This can be an instructional tool that we're trying. And when we think the kid needs it to guarantee a free, appropriate public education, let's pull everyone back together and make sure we decide together as a team that this is what we think the kid needs to guarantee FAPE.
Okay. That makes sense.
Cool.
I like that. I'm trying to think about any other questions.
Well, to get back to your sort of like paperwork thing, I think, so listeners, Kristen sent me a Google site ahead of time which was so well done, Kristen. I just want to tell you the thought process and the easy to follow. If I was a teacher in your school district, I'd be like, awesome, I know exactly what I need to do, right? And you have all the resources in one place. So I think something to consider is taking that same website, which maybe you've already shared. You might have like a Bitly or QR codes to it, so people might already be familiar with it, or maybe it's something new and you haven't implemented yet. Either way, you've got that tool and you can make adjustments to it. Imagine there saying, do you need help making a decision? Here's our, we'll be your facilitator, right? When can we meet? Here's the paperwork we're going to use. We're going to use this chart and come up with a little bit of a chart with a summary thing underneath. And at first, I would think you would want to be there to help guide them through that. Or maybe, again, if you have some really seasoned speech therapists, get them together and just do it as a pilot for a little while. Hey, you three, we know you rock at this. Can we try this on with you? Next kid, can we just do this approach for a little while and see what you think and get your feedback? We don't have to do, your entire school district all at once, although you can. We could trial it if that made your administration feel easier or made you feel easier. But then you could work out the paperwork that way. That could go up on the website. And then think 5 years down the line, right? Some teams, some teachers, they're staying longer because they feel like they're supported and they have a say in the decision-making process. Like that's one of the reasons maybe they're staying longer. They have this facilitated process, Kristen, where you were there asking these sort of questions. But let's say they've been through that 3 or 4 times. Do they still need you, 4 or 5 years from now? Or are they like, yeah, I feel pretty good asking these questions. I kind of know how to lead us through this conversation. Then maybe you can sort of back off. But at the first stage here, it sort of makes sense. Well, this is new. I know what I'm good at, and I know what I've done for many years. I know I go in and I suggest LAMP, right? Or I know I go in and I suggest Prolo Quo. I don't know how to lead a conversation where I ask questions about, what do we think the access methodology is? And then withhold my answer to hear what everybody else says, because what I'm really good at as a speech therapist is telling you that you need something with a black background and white text. You know what I mean? So that's a skill that takes time to develop, and that's something that you could model and practice with them as they learn to take a back seat to or become part of the decision-making process rather than the decision maker.
Yes.
So what do you think about it? What do you think about all of that?
I like it. I really do. Yeah.
Cool. All right. What other questions? What else sort of resonates with you or doesn't, or sort of is tripping you up?
I mean, that pretty much answered all of my questions. Because we discussed trials. We discussed the whole, basically I'm doing away with AT formal is what it sounds like.
There will be times. Here's what I'll tell you. There'll be times because we'll have some sort of lawyer or advocate or some parent that's really demanding it, and they're sort of used to it. we never say no, right? When I say we, I mean, let's say as a country, let's say we don't say no, because that could get us in hot water, because in the law, there's the word evaluation in the definition of assistive technology service, and it says there's the word evaluation. So we won't fight it. Yes, we'll do it, and I would say maybe you could try to work on eliminating the adjective before the word evaluation, because it's sort of, are there different types of evaluations? No, it's just we're either doing this or we're not doing this. And what it's going to result in is it's going to result in me, a person, well, not me, but a person coming out, observing, talking to all the people, trying some things, writing it up on a piece of paper that has the official banner of our school district at the top, and it's got our nice logo on it, and I'll sign it at the bottom, and that will look very official, and it'll take a number of. That's one way of doing it. That's an evaluation. We won't say no to it, but can we consider this other thing where we get together and we discuss it, especially around AAC, and but I would say all of assistive technology, and we come to a conclusion together about the things we'd like to try. So I think what I'm really advocating for you, Kristen, is, again, you can think of your service delivery model as a triangle. Like, well, what's our tier one? Our tier one is a facilitated conversation, but are we ever going to say no to this other thing? No. For individual cases, yes. And, there's always sort of one-off things in special education that's, in this situation, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. But as your general practice, tier one service strategy, you could, yes, sort of not do away with, but reduce, minimize.
Reduce. Yeah.
I also noticed in your Google Sites, you had mentioned the WADI, and that is what we used when we were sort of developing our process. So the WADI is, for listeners, the Wisconsin Assistive Technology Initiative, and part of that is something called the ASNAT. All that is, it's free resources that you can go and look at. But if you're like, okay, Chris, you just ran through a bunch of questions for AAC, but what are other questions I might ask? Or you sort of glossed over the access methodologies, but what if I needed to go deeper? They do. Like, they go through sort of, all right, we might need to take more than 60 minutes to figure this one out. Let's have a series of meetings where we are structuring these on a calendar, and we are going through the questions of the WADI to help us figure out how to answer that access question, or how to figure out this positioning question, right? Whatever the questions might be, that tool goes a lot more in depth and can help you figure out as a facilitator what questions to ask to the entire team.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I noticed what you were doing, I think, is having like one person try and fill that out, but this makes it more of a collaborative effort, right? Is that
right? It was just the SLP.
Yeah, right. This way, everybody owns it, if they do it together.
Yeah. And I like that, because we do need our teachers, and mostly our teachers, to be helping more. But also, I really want to try to involve the parents more too,
Definitely in the decision-making process, because then they'll own it,
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, right? We hear is that, the parents don't really know how to implement it at home. And you just said the time thing, and our service delivery model is everywhere across the country. It's likely 90% direct services to a kid, maybe 5% talking to is consulting with the teachers, and another 5% is maybe consulting with the parents and giving them stuff to do at home, But what if we could increase that by having them have part of the decision-making process,
Do you meet with parents to help train them?
Well, so every place has their growth points. And so let me say this, back in the pandemic, I think everywhere across the country was a little bit closer to that model than we are now. So remember, were you working during the pandemic, right?
I was part-time. I was doing early intervention.
Amy, were you working with over the pandemic?
Yes, I was doing speech therapy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what happened? Did you do it online with your kids?
I did. And it was, well, depending on the child and the parent, really. Some of them were successful and participated, but the majority did not. But I was also at a Title I school, so internet was an issue, and some of them they were with grandparents or neighbors or whoever during the day. So, I mean, it was definitely challenging.
Sure. Well, something we saw, you just mentioned with those people, whoever they are, who is supporting the kid could be in that lesson with you. And you could sort of, again, think of your pie chart. I've got 30 minutes with you or 60 minutes with you online. Do I need to be spending all that time with the kid? Well, we know we need to improve the skills of the communication partner, and that's going to be even better for the student. And by the way, grandparents are going to be with the kid a lot longer than I am, or parents are, or the siblings are, or aunts and uncles are. So let me focus more time on you. So that could be, again, Kristen, if you were writing long-term goals, I think across the country, I think it'd be fair to say we could do we could be thinking about how could we change our service delivery to increase our time with our parents to help them become better communication partners.
Yeah.
But as a first,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, as a first step, maybe get those iPads, maybe think about how we select, together, and then invite them in, because there's only so much you can do, all at once. But as a long-term goal, I think it's a good goal.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Don't you, Kristen, as your parent, like you think about, take off your speech hat and put on your parent hat. How much time do you spend with your child's speech therapist? And would it benefit you for any of your family members to be spending time with that speech therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that I really liked about early intervention. They were great at teaching me how to do that, Yeah. And then eventually I had to teach other people how to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's so funny you say that, because we have a podcast episode from a couple of years ago with Dr. Lauren Kravitz Bonnet. She's one of the people participating in that episode. And what they talk about in that episode is just what you're saying, is that what if we have a model for this in special education. It's IFSPs, right? It's that early intervention model for how we implemented therapy, how we approached therapy or intervention. What if we look to that as a model for extending that into the regular school? You know what I mean? Preschool and when I say regular school, preschool and up.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Other questions like, I know something else. Maybe I think as we were emailing back and forth, and you sort of mentioned it. What about like private funding? Well, private funding, or getting through insurances and things, you're still going to have all that same paperwork. You might have to do, again, if we think of the service delivery model as this triangle, that again, how often do we have to do that? Not as often. So yes, but occasionally we'll still have to run through whatever the hoops are to get that funding, But if we're purchasing it through our school district funding, we don't have to do that. We don't have to follow those rules.
That was another thing they mentioned in that conference when they were talking about formal AT evaluations. They're like, if you're going through private funding or insurance funding, they recommended that you do a formal process as far as the paperwork goes. Which I know I'm writing a report already, but I'm like, for our district, does that mean I do a re-eval for IEP changes and amend the IEP and go through all of those things? Or do we meet and just say we're going to do this? Or
well, okay. Again, I think it's really helpful to think, well, that doesn't have to be our main process, right? I can figure out the one-off or two-off things when that happens, if we're going through that funding source. But if we're not, and really assistive technology is free to those who need it with disabilities, right? Like it's part of the law. If you're found eligible, then as a person with a disability, then as a student with a disability, and you're in the public school system, then it's free to you. So you don't necessarily have to go through that private funding, right?
Yeah. I think the reason I was also kind of looking at it, we got all this COVID funding and we got all these iPads, and the iPads are getting old. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, and that was another reason I think I got hired, because it was like, well, can you find money? Can you write reports? Which I do like with the reports. The parents are going to get support. We have a warranty. They said they will train teachers if we need it.
Who will train the teachers, and who's giving you the support?
the reps.
Do you think so this will be a question for your rep, and for the different companies, but I get a lot of support from the reps, and we never submit any sort of funding that way, right? We purchased your thing. That's how we purchased your thing is not relevant, but your thing was purchased, and so we're going to give you support. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. They're just interested. And in fact, okay, let's take it off the reps point of view and take it onto your administrator's point of view. But yes, look, we say we didn't have to buy this $8,000 device. It went through private insurance. Yeah. Count up the number of hours it took you, Kristen, to do the evaluation, do the trial, write it up. How long did that take? And how much do you make an hour? Right. So you just freed up all that time if I don't have to do it that way. Right. So, and oftentimes they think, yeah, but we're paying your salary. Yeah. But look at how look at the devices over there that got abandoned. Right. So did you really save $8,000? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. And again, there's lots of kids that maybe you did, Kristen, if you don't mind me asking, putting on your parent hat, you said your child uses LampWords for Life on an iPad, on an Accent, or both?
He's on an Accent because he has VI.
Gotcha. Because you needed that. Yeah. And it's not on the iPad. Right. Okay. So again, if you don't mind, let me ask him, we can always cut this. Private insurance, or did you go through the school district to get that?
Private. He goes to outpatient therapy, and she wrote the report for him.
And she wrote the report. Okay. So there's a whole different thing. So how much time did it take the teachers or this private the public speech therapist to do that? Nothing, because you went through outpatient. Yeah?
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it there, right? Because a lot of administrators will make it up in their head that look how much that's time and look how much money that's going to cost. And here's a perfect example of a parent that got AAC without costing for a device costing $1 to the public school.
I guess I'm also thinking about our kids that are, have behaviors, and they're, throwing iPads or slamming them against their head or stepping on them. And we're going through like 15 iPads a year.
Yeah.
So that was an issue too.
Okay.
We did the warranties.
Well, okay. So yes, the warranty could be a thing. So here's some things you could investigate. One is the cases that you're using. If the case keeps breaking, are the cases that we're using, are they the right case? And you mentioned these sort of relationships you have with vendors of devices. Well, how about relationships with vendors of cases? And you might do some research around finding cases that come with warranties as well. Like, hey, if the iPad breaks in our case, we believe in our case so much that we've got a warranty. We'll pay for the iPad if it breaks. Right. You might find a company that does that. Let me just say, I know some exist. Right. But being a podcast that doesn't take sponsorship, right. I don't want to necessarily give out a name, but just know there's stuff out there that exists. Right. So that's number one. Two, more time spent teaching the teachers how to have neurodiversity affirming practices that will decrease the number of times that I'm feeling so super frustrated. And that's not always why someone might break an iPad, but typically, not typically, I use that word too often. With iPads break, it might be because someone's frustrated, and let's get to why they're frustrated, as opposed to let's try and put a better wrap around the iPad and keep frustrating the person. Let's fix the environment, not the tool, and so by freeing up your time to do less evaluations, you can work better on implementing those neurodiversity approaching practices so that the number of breakages go down.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
That's their goal.
Yeah, I think it's a good goal. It would be interesting to say we would like to increase the number of iPads that don't get broken. iPads that go all year and what I mean is there's always going to be an occasional drop and a superficial thing here and there. It's part of it. Again, when those things happen, awesome. That means they're being used, right? But so writing some sort of goal around that could be a thing, you know?
Yeah. Okay. I will definitely look into the case thing though.
Yeah. Just,
I don't know if we're doing that. Amy, do you know if we have cases that have a warranty on them?
I am not sure. I don't really deal with much of the selection of cases and ordering, but I can look into it for sure.
ooh, let me ask you that. Do you have sort of a tier 1 case? Like, when we get an iPad, we put them in this case, or is that hit or miss for each individual person?
I believe we mostly use OtterBox, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I think we've switched cases a couple of times.
Okay.
Yeah.
The person who was managing the inventory. So I don't know exactly what we have on it now. So we'll have to look at
Okay.
that.
Same deal. Imagine getting a small group of people together and saying, all right, what do we want out of a case? Well, we want a warranty. We want a screen protector, and we find these screen protectors are, well, let's see, which one breaks more frequently than that. We need one with a stand. We want one that has a color. We want one that, whatever, right? You create, in the same way we're figuring out what a kid needs, what do we need? And so you create this list in the first column, and then we go OtterBox, rugged, just keep listing them, you know, and now let's go shopping, you know, which one has the most? Hey, rep, we'd like to test yours out. What's your warranty like? Oh, we don't have one. Okay. That's a big null in that, you know. Oh, you do have one? Okay. Tell us about it. Right. And you could do a little research project to figure out what would be the tier 1 thing. And again, it won't be for everybody, but just when we get an iPad, we put it in this, unless this is the thing, unless someone says, you know what, actually this kid needs this thing or that thing, you know, and then when we can always make adjustments. Our tier 1 is this case. Our tier 3, we can customize based on individual needs.
Okay. Yeah. I think that was it. Do you remember me mentioning anything else in the email? No?
No, I think that summarizes it. But how about we end with this, Kristen and Amy? Take a moment, if you wouldn't mind. I'll invite you to take a moment and summarize what you think your action steps are from this.
Oh, gosh.
Like 1 or 2, what are your next steps? What do you think you're going to do?
Well, I need to like revamp the whole process that I had mapped out for sure on my little website.
Okay.
What else?
Again, Kristen, I mean, I know this thing, what I just described. I'm very confident in it, right? But I also, not but, and I would invite you to think about, well, before I revamp all this, maybe I flesh it out on a Google Doc and I show it to a few people and they tear it apart and they go, yeah, but, before I delete everything I have on my Google site. You know what I mean? Don't take Chris Bougay's word for one person. You know, I don't feel like it's just me. I feel like I'm representing a lot of places that have adopted something like this. But that said, you know, it wouldn't hurt for you to have some allies in your neck of the woods that wrestle with it and tear it apart and also have some ownership around it, rather than, what is Kristen doing? Talk to this one person. And I don't hear this podcast episode. It hasn't come out for months. Like, yeah, you know what I mean? Having a group of people that sort of agree with this, like Amy and you together, I feel like it's always better to have champions, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Any other takeaways or action steps?
I'm definitely going to look into the case thing. Definitely going to use the chart. I like the chart idea for the decision making in the meetings.
Cool. Yeah. Based off the WADI, really, you know?
Yeah.
Cool. Try. We're going to just implement. We're going to make a decision and implement. Does that feel like a thing?
Yes.
We'll start
collecting data. That's where I was really confused. Like, I'm like, at what point do we meet?
And Kristen, let me just say, everyone has been confused for the last 10-ish, 15-ish years. Like, how does this make sense? And what's the magic line someone has to cross to be able to say this is the thing we need to use? So you are not alone there in wrestling with that.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'm thankful for people like you that are wrestling with it, that don't just go, well, that's how we've been doing it for years, so I guess that's how it works,
Right. Well, I just know what we've been doing is not working very efficiently. So like, we've got to figure this out.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, listen, don't be strangers, feel free to hit me up along the way and follow up later, let's 6 months from now or a year from now. You're like, all right, Chris, we did it. And guess what happened? And for good or bad, I'd love to hear what the growing pains were, what worked, what didn't work, what you do differently, because there'll be people on your heels trying to figure this out as well. And, as a larger community, it only benefits everybody if we share like this. So again, thank you. And thank your administration for coming on, allowing you to come on and record this for everyone else to hear.
Yeah. Thank you so much for meeting with us. Really, it's been
Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Don't get blisters on your fingers from cutting those posters.
Thanks.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.